His phone vibrated under another woman's hand. Whoever called 9 times wanted something worth bleeding for, the Mafia boss said. Now she has my attention, and that usually ruins lives. Sophia Marino restored damaged voices for a living, but that night her own voice kept breaking on the word please. She was 24, careful with broken things, and far too ordinary for the kind of number her dying brother pressed into her hand. In 2 minutes, she left the first voicemail with blood on her sleeve and sirens behind her. In 2 hours, she was standing in front of Dante Salvatore while his discarded mistress's lipstick still marked the edge of his glass. She had one secret in her bag, a damaged audio file her dead father had hidden for 12 years. If it was nothing, she had dragged herself into a kingdom built on murder for no reason. If it was what she feared, it would either save Dante Salvatore's life or teach him exactly how many ways a silenced phone could destroy a man twice. Dante Salvatore's phone buzzed once against the walnut table. Nobody reached for it. The men seated around him knew better. Numbers, routes, names, ports. Those moved across the room in low Italian, clipped and clean. Then the phone buzzed again. A third time. A fourth. Bianca Conti smiled before she touched it. Her red nail slid over the screen. The vibration stopped. She flipped the switch on the side, turned the device face down, and rose on her toes just enough to press a slow kiss to Dante's mouth like a curtain being drawn. He let her, because letting people think they had managed him sometimes showed more than refusal. By the time the 9th call came, the room had already decided the night belonged to him. It didn't. My brother left blood on my sleeve when he pushed the phone into my hand. "Call that number," Paolo said, and then coughed so hard his whole body bent with it. Rain ran off his hair and down into his eyes. The alley behind San Marzio smelled like wet brick, fryer oil, and the sharp metal stink of too much blood. Not the police. Him. I looked at the number on the cracked receipt he pressed into my palm. "Paolo, I'm calling an ambulance." "I know you are." His laugh broke in the middle. "Call him too." I did both. The ambulance dispatcher answered on the first ring. Dante Salvatore's phone did not. I left a voicemail. My voice sounded too calm, which scared me more than if I had been screaming. "Mr. Salvatore, my name is Sophia Marino. My brother worked valet at Pier 9 tonight. He heard men talking about a shipment and your name. He was followed. They stabbed him. Please call me back." Rain struck the awning overhead in hard, fast clicks. Paolo's hand found my wrist. His fingers were slippery. The first siren wailed somewhere too far away. I called again and again. By the 6th time, my voice had gone thin with fury. "Answer your phone." By the 9th, I was standing in the emergency corridor with Paolo behind double doors and my mother calling me from home because she had seen blood on my shirt when I ran out and thought history had come back for us. I did not answer her. I called Dante Salvatore one more time and got silence, then stared at the dark screen until my own reflection blurred. At 1:15 in the morning, a nurse came toward me with the face medical people wear when they have practiced compassion enough times to keep it small. My brother lived. For the moment, he had lost too much blood. He had managed one more sentence before they sedated him. Locker, station, Baba's tapes. Then he slept while machines breathed around him, and I stood there with a gangster's private number in one hand and my own life splitting quietly in two. I should have gone home. Instead, I went to the central station locker where Paolo used to stash his gym shoes and things he didn't want our mother asking about. Inside, I found a small hard drive wrapped in a hand towel, and under it, one of my father's old mini cassettes in a plastic case labeled only with the date. My father had been dead for 12 years. He repaired church sound systems and old reel-to-reel decks out of our apartment after his mechanic shifts ended. He never threw away a voice. I stared at the tape until the chill from the station floor crawled through my shoes. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered before it finished the first note. Miss Marino. His voice was lower than I expected. Not rough. Worse. Controlled. The kind of voice that assumed doors opened before he reached them. Yes. A pause. I heard nothing behind him. No traffic. No room tone. Money bought that kind of silence. You called me 9 times. My brother's in surgery because you didn't answer once. The line went still. I should have apologized. Anyone with survival instincts would have. But Paolo was bleeding into white sheets somewhere because men had said Dante's name in the dark, and something inside me had gone past fear into a colder place. He gave me an address in Brooklyn. You have 20 minutes, he said. When I arrived, the gates were already open. That frightened me most. The villa rose out of the dark like a refusal. Limestone walls, black iron, too much glass for a man who needed privacy, unless the point was that nobody alive would dare break it. Men with earpieces watched me cross the front drive. One opened the door without speaking. Inside, the air smelt faintly of expensive cologne over rain-soaked wool and old stone that held the night cold inside it. A woman in a black dress stood near the staircase, lipstick the color of split cherries. Her eyes slid over my damp jeans, my coat, my face. Bianca, I thought without knowing how. Upstairs, a man waited in a study lined with dark shelves and a single green banker's lamp. He was standing when I entered, one hand flat on the desk, not leaning. Claiming, Dante Salvatore was not beautiful. Beautiful would have made him easier to understand. He looked like the sort of man cities were arranged around by mistake. Dark suit, no tie, white shirt open at the throat. A scar cut through one eyebrow and disappeared into his hairline. The silence around him felt organized. His phone sat on the desk between us. Face down, I looked at it, then at the woman in the doorway behind me, and understood something ugly all at once. The lipstick on the rim of the whiskey glass. The shape of her satisfaction. The phone too, still on polished wood. You silenced it, I said. Bianca smiled. Dante's gaze sharpened on me, not her. You came here to accuse people in my house. I stepped forward before my fear caught up. Took the phone. Every man in the room moved at once, one hand to a jacket. One sharp inhale, one curse in Italian from near the door. I ignored all of them. My thumb found the switch on the side. I clicked the sound back on and placed the phone in Dante's open palm. If you keep a number for emergencies, I said, and heard my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Don't let other people touch it. Nobody spoke. Then Dante looked at the phone in his hand like it had become something heavier. His jaw set once. Not anger. Recognition. When he lifted his eyes to me again, something in them had changed shape. What did your brother hear? He asked. I told him about Pier Novi, the voices, the mention of a shipment, a name Paolo couldn't make out, men following him after his shift. The knife. I put the cassette and hard drive on his desk. These were in his locker, my father's old tape. I don't know why Paolo had them. I know enough not to bring things like this to the police. Bianca shifted behind me. Leather brushed silk. Very soft. Very loud in the room. Dante said, leave. She stared at him. Dante now. Now she went. Only after the door shut did I realize I had been holding air instead of breathing. He picked up the cassette, turned it once in his fingers, then set it down with maddening care. You don't know what you walked into, he said. I know my brother might die because of it. His eyes held mine. Deep brown, almost black, not warm. Not empty either. Worse than empty. Used. From this moment, he said, you don't go home. That's not your decision. It is now. I opened my mouth. He spoke over me, soft as a knife being laid out beside a plate. Bruno will take men to the hospital. Luca will move your mother. And you? His gaze dropped just once to the blood dried at my cuff before lifting again. Answer when I call 9. 9. Not Sophia, not Miss. A number. A fact. A thing he had noticed and kept. The banker's lamp threw green light across the desk between us. His phone stayed in his hand. The door locked behind me. I woke to the sound of church bells I could not place. For 3 thick seconds I forgot where I was. Then the ceiling reminded me painted beams, pale plaster, a crown molding too old to be tasteful and too expensive to argue with. My body felt wrong in every direction. I had slept in jeans on top of a blanket because sleeping under somebody else's roof felt too much like permission. The room itself was almost kind. A carved wardrobe, a cream chair by tall windows, a tray with water and aspirin on the nightstand. The door, when I tried it, opened. The hallway did not. A man the size of a refrigerator stood at the far end beside a console table full of white lilies. He wore a suit that looked offended by his shoulders and was eating almonds from a tiny plastic container. "Please don't make me sprint before coffee," he said. "I'm in a fasting window." I stared. He tipped the container toward me. "Bruno Rizzi, head of security, amateur victim of Maria Donati's cooking. You must be 9. "I am absolutely not 9. He chewed. That's what everyone says right before the boss keeps calling them that. He led me downstairs past oil portraits of dead Salvatores who all looked like they had considered mercy and found it inefficient. The villa smelled of espresso, beeswax, and something richer from the kitchen tomatoes cooked down in butter, basil, torn by hand. My stomach turned over in spite of myself. Maria Donati looked up from the stove as we entered. She was in her 50s, with silver threaded through dark hair and a face made softer by years of deciding when to speak and when to let silence do it. She took one look at me and put down the spoon. Madonna. She crossed the room and touched my cheek as if checking for fever. "Too thin." Bruno made a sound of sincere pain. "This is how it starts. First her, then me. Maria, I have goals. You have bones," Maria said. "Sit down." He sat down. I almost laughed. It startled me enough that I forgot not to. Maria set a plate in front of me. Soft eggs, toast rubbed with garlic, one orange peeled in spirals. The domesticity of it landed harder than the armed man at the hallway. "My mother?" I asked, moved before dawn. Came a voice from the doorway. "Dante." He wore the same black he had worn last night, or one identical to it. No tie again, his hair still slightly damp at the temples as if he had showered fast, and somewhere in the house water still ran because his day had not truly stopped long enough to become morning. The room changed shape when he entered. Bruno straightened. Maria did not. That told me more than either of them had. "She's at one of our apartments downtown with a nurse," Dante said. "Your brother came out of surgery, he's alive." The relief was so sharp I had to grip the edge of the table. "Can I see him?" "Not yet." "That isn't your choice either." He pulled out the chair across from me and sat with one forearm resting on the wood. "Everything around you is my choice until I know who tried to use you." The bells outside stopped. The kitchen fell into the small sounds that follow a sentence. Nobody can fight without losing. Water ticking in old pipes, the stove flame. Bruno cracking another almond between his teeth like it personally offended him. "I wasn't used," I said. "I was warned. By a brother who kept evidence in a station locker and gave my private number to his sister. I don't know how he got it. But you called anyway. I would do it again." Something moved once at the corner of Dante's mouth. Not amusement. Approval maybe against his will. Maria slid a cup of coffee in front of me and without looking at Dante said, "She should see her mother today." Bruno closed his eyes like a man witnessing bold criminal behavior. Dante looked at Maria. She looked back. It seemed to me that very few people inside this house survived by pretending not to see him. They survived by knowing exactly where to place their own refusal. "After lunch," she said. Maria went back to the stove. Bruno exhaled in visible gratitude. I ate because not eating would have looked like weakness, and also because Maria's eggs tasted like somebody remembering how to care for another human being with their hands. Dante watched me once, briefly, when I burned my tongue on the coffee and tried not to show it. "Your father worked with sound," he said. I looked up. "You went through my things. I went through your father." The coldness of the answer should have offended me. It did, but there was something under it. Not cruelty exactly. Economy. "He repaired audio equipment," I said. "Old tapes. Church systems. People brought him broken messages when they wanted to hear dead voices one more time. And you? I restore damaged files now. Archive work mostly. Private clients if they pay enough." Bruno perked up. "Can you restore my metabolism?" Maria smacked the back of his head with a dish towel as she passed. Eat the bread. It's gluten, Maria. I'd rather take a bullet. Aim for his mouth, Maria told me. I laughed then. Actually laughed. The sound came out wrong in that kitchen, too bright against all the locked doors and armed men. But Bruno looked so wounded by his own life that I couldn't help it. Dante's gaze shifted to my mouth and away. It happened so quickly I might have imagined it. Almost. Then he stood. Luca will bring the cassette. You're going to tell me what's on it. I told you. I don't know. You will. He walked toward the door. I pushed back my chair. Dante. He stopped without turning. Your mistress. The word tasted ugly. Did she know my calls mattered? The silence that followed seemed to lower the room's temperature. When he looked back at me, there was nothing casual left in him. Bianca is no longer in this house. That doesn't answer the question. No, he said. It doesn't. He left. I sat back down slowly. Bruno reached for the bread, stared at it like it was an enemy combatant, then set it on my plate instead. For the record, he muttered, if Maria ever chooses another man over me, I hope she at least ruins his diet first. Maria rolled her eyes so hard I heard it, but when she touched my shoulder on her way past, her hand was gentle. By noon, I understood the first rule of Dante Salvatore's world. Kindness existed here. It just never arrived without conditions. The study had been converted into a war room by the time Luca Ferrante let me in. Maps. Port schedules. 2 laptops open to security footage with no sound. A bowl of untouched blood oranges on the credenza. Men came and went with files tucked under their arms and their voices carefully lowered whenever they crossed the doorway. Luca stood by the window in a gray suit that fit him like suspicion. He was younger than I had expected for a consigliere, maybe mid-30s. With the exhausted neatness of a man who kept other people's disasters alphabetized. If this turns into nothing, he said without greeting, you go home today. That seems optimistic. For you? Yes. He handed me my father's cassette in a clear evidence bag and Paolo's hard drive separately. Somebody had already cleaned the blood from the plastic casing. The tenderness of that detail caught me off guard. Dante sat at the far end of the table with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the forearm. He did not rise this time. There were shadows under his eyes, faint and new. His phone lay beside his hand, screen lit, sound on. The sight of it did something strange to my chest. Can you work? He asked. Yes. Luca had arranged a portable audio station for me, better than the one at my studio, in fact. Interface, monitors, restoration software, a deck compatible with older tapes. Money solved many things. It even solved patience when rich men wanted answers fast. I sat. Plug it in. Checked levels. Ground hum. Tape hiss. I breathed once, then pressed play. For 30 seconds I heard nothing but static and room tone. Then my father's voice emerged like someone opening a door from underwater. Date. Time. Routine identification. He used to label everything aloud before repairing it. Even private jobs. Even things nobody asked him to preserve. I leaned closer. A second voice came in under his mail, older, slurred around the edges with drink and arrogance. The signal clipped whenever he laughed. I cleaned what I could while Dante and Luca stood behind me, close enough that I felt the heat of another body at my back and knew, without looking, which body it was. The unknown man said, the boy needed hardening. My fingers stopped over the keyboard. I adjusted the EQ, brought down the hiss, isolated the vocal range. The voice sharpened. His sister crying on the phone was unfortunate, the man said, but useful. Grief makes kings faster than love ever did. The room went perfectly still. I turned. Dante had gone so quiet he barely looked alive. One hand braced on the edge of the table. The knuckles white. Luca swore once under his breath in Italian. Again, Dante said. I replayed it. This time I heard the clink of ice, a chair leg dragging, and beneath the voice, very faint, a classical station ID from the old local radio frequency that used to broadcast from Bensonhurst. My father must have recorded in a car or a back room near an open radio. You know him, I said softly. Dante's face had changed. Not broken. Narrowed. Like something had slid shut behind his eyes. Luca answered for him, Lorenzo Vitelli. The name meant nothing to me and too much to both of them. My uncle, Dante said. The word uncle did not belong in that room. It made everything worse. I looked back at the waveform on screen. This isn't the only layer. There's more buried under the clipping. I began separating channels, filtering frequency bands, chasing the thread my father had preserved by accident or design. Dante stepped closer. His hand landed beside mine on the desk, not touching. Near enough that I could feel the cold from his ring. Almost. Here, I murmured, and pointed. Listen to the background. We listened. A gull cried. A low mechanical horn answered, distant but regular. Not a ship. Too short. A ferry crossing, maybe. Then a bell tower striking the quarter hour with one cracked note on the third bell. I knew that sound. Red Hook, I said. The old church near the ferry dock. There's a bell there with a split in the bronze. My father used to complain you could hear it from 3 blocks away on summer nights. Luca turned to Dante at once. Pier warehouse. Move, Dante said. The room exploded into motion. Men grabbed jackets, phones, guns. A chair tipped. Italian filled the air, low and fast. Luca was already on the phone before he cleared the doorway. I stayed seated for 1 stupid second, hands still resting on the console. Dante looked down at me. You stay here. No, yes. You need somebody who can keep listening. His gaze dropped to the screen, then back to me. Calculating. He did that too well. It should have offended me. Instead, I found myself watching the pulse beat once in his throat. Take her, he said to no one I could see. No heroics. Bruno appeared as if the wallpaper had grown him. I don't do heroics before protein. The drive to Red Hook smelled like leather, rain trapped in wool, and Bruno's mint gum. The windows were blacked enough to make the city feel distant. I sat in the back with my laptop balanced on my knees, scrubbing through the audio again, while Bruno drove with one hand and complained with the other. I had 6 almonds and spiritual hope for breakfast, he said. Now we're doing felony cardio. You can say no? I asked. Bruno looked at me in the mirror like I had asked whether gravity was optional. When we arrived, the warehouse was already half surrounded. Men in dark coats moved between stacks of crates. Dante stood near the loading bay speaking to Luca, profile cut hard against the gray harbor light. Someone fired from inside. Bruno swore. Men scattered. The crack of gunfire snapped off metal and water. Dante shoved me behind a concrete pillar with one arm across my ribs so fast I only understood the movement when my back hit stone. His body blocked mine without asking whether I wanted that kind of protection. His hand stayed there 1 second longer than necessary. Almost. Down, he said. I went down. Inside the warehouse, somebody screamed. Then, over the gunfire and the ferry horn and the rushing blood in my ears, I heard the muted buzz of a phone vibrating somewhere against wood. Dante heard it too. He turned toward the sound with murder in his face. Someone was already moving against us. The warehouse had a meat locker in the back. That was where Bruno dragged me when the second wave of shots came through the loading bay and men started shouting that Lorenzo's crew had come in from the riverside. The heavy door slammed behind us with a seal like a vault closing. Cold air rushed against my face. Metal hooks swung overhead, empty except for plastic sheeting and the smell of old blood scrubbed badly out of concrete. I hate enclosed spaces, Bruno announced to the frost. I stared at him. This is your chosen profession. No, my chosen profession was football. My knee betrayed me. My mother blamed Satan. And now I carry guns for men with abandonment issues. Despite the gunfire outside, a laugh broke out of me. Sharp. Nervous. Real. Bruno lifted one finger. If Maria asks, tell her I died brave and very low carb. The outside noise blurred through the insulated walls. Muffled shots. Men yelling. The whole world reduced to impact and guesswork. I pressed my hand flat to the steel shelving beside me just to feel something solid. Then the freezer door opened and Dante stepped in. Cold followed him differently, as if the outside had clung to his coat. There was blood on his cuff. Not much. Too fresh. My body moved before my mind did. "Are you hit?" He looked at me, then at the hand already reaching for him. I stopped just short of touching the blood. Almost. "It's not mine," he said. Bruno made an offended noise, and suddenly my stress is invalid. Dante ignored him. "We found Paolo's attacker, alive, for 30 seconds. I swallowed against the rise of nausea. "Did he say anything?" "He said Bianca met with Lorenzo 3 nights ago." I shut my eyes. The cold deepened around my spine. The title of Mistress had already been ugly in my mouth. Now it seemed childish beside the actual damage she had done. "She knew," I said. "Yes." Dante said it without softness and without spectacle. Bianca had done this. Full stop. In some twisted corner of me, the certainty hurt more than denial would have. Bruno shifted his weight, hooks clinking overhead. "Boss, if we're having emotional revelations in a freezer, I'd like a blanket and maybe a priest." Dante reached into his coat pocket, took out his phone and checked the screen. His expression barely changed, but I saw it, the tiny recoil. Another missed call. Hospital. My throat closed. "Paolo?" He answered the return call in Italian too fast for me to catch every word. Enough got through. Stable. Awake. Asking for Sophia. Relief knocked my knees soft. Dante looked at me after he ended the call. "He's alive." I leaned back against the metal shelf and pressed one hand to my mouth because I could not do anything graceful with relief. It came ugly. Wet eyes. Too much air. My shoulders shaking once. Dante stepped closer. Bruno, blessedly, turned and pretended to inspect a wall of frozen inventory labels like they contained scripture. Dante took out a folded handkerchief and held it toward me. I stared at it. "Take it," he said. His voice had changed, only by a degree, but I heard degrees for a living. I took it. Our fingers brushed. Almost. His hand was colder than mine. Not because he was calm. Because he had been outside in the harbor wind killing men and come back in, carrying that temperature with him. "What happened to your sister?" I asked before I could stop myself. His gaze lifted to the metal hooks above us. For a second I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, a phone rang. I didn't hear it in time. Nothing more. No speech. No self-forgiveness. Just one sentence laid between us like broken glass. The freezer door opened again. Luca stepped in with a file tucked under his arm and the look of a man whose day had no remaining patience. "We have footage," he said, "from the dining room." He handed Dante a phone. I knew before I saw it. Bianca's mouth on his, her hand turning the switch, the ninth vibration trapped under her palm. My stomach rolled. "She's gone," Luca said. "Left one of the apartments before dawn. Lorenzo's people cleaned the place." Dante watched the screen once. Only once. When he handed the phone back to Luca, his face was unreadable again, but his next order came out thin and lethal. "Find her." Luca nodded and left. Bruno muttered, "If we survive today, I'm breaking my fast with violence." When the door shut again, Dante looked at me in the bright freezer light with his coat open, his shirt collar loosened, and blood drying at his wrist. He looked less like a boss then, and more like something worse, a man who had just been shown the exact shape of an old wound wearing a new face. "I should have answered," he said. "The truth of it should have satisfied me. It didn't. Because I could hear what he actually meant. Not my call. The other one. If you had," I said carefully, "they still might have come for Paolo. But not for you." The words dropped heavy between us. I should have argued. Instead, I looked at the handkerchief in my fist, white linen marked with one tiny stitch of black thread at the corner. "DS, I restored damaged things," I said, mostly to the floor. "Not all of them survive." His eyes stayed on me. "That doesn't mean you stop trying." Bruno sniffed loudly. I would like the record to show I am freezing beside this tenderness and nobody has offered me a monogrammed cloth. I laughed into Dante's handkerchief. He looked at my mouth again. Almost. Then the radio at his shoulder crackled. More movement at the river. He stepped back at once. The small warmth gone from the room like it had never been there. Bruno takes you to the hospital, he said, then back to the villa. What about you? He checked the magazine in his pistol with one efficient click. I finished this. He moved toward the door. Dante, he paused. Be late for everything else, I said. Not for this. His head inclined once. Not agreement. Not promise. Something rarer. He had heard me. Then he went out into the cold with a violence so contained it was more frightening than rage. The freezer seemed empty without him, though Bruno still occupied half of it. I'm eating pasta. If he dies, Bruno said solemnly. He's not going to die. Bruno looked at the shut door. No, he said, but the people outside might wish they had. Paolo looked too young under hospital light. My brother was 27 and broad-shouldered and usually loud enough to fill a room badly, but pain had pressed him flat. Tubes disappeared into his arm. Bruises bloomed purple under his skin. When he saw me, tears sprang to his eyes so suddenly that mine answered without dignity. I told you not to wear that shirt, he whispered. I let out a broken laugh and sat carefully beside him. You nearly died and you're criticizing laundry. It has bleach stains. I took his hand. Idiot. He squeezed weakly. Did he come? He answered eventually. Paolo's eyelids drooped with medication. Good. Baba said if anything ever happened, the tape went to Salvatore blood, not police. My spine straightened. You knew what was on it? Not all of it. He swallowed. Baba got scared after he recorded Lorenzo. Said some truths don't free you, Soph. They just make more powerful men desperate. Why didn't you tell me? Because you still believed we were normal. The sentence hurt more than it should have, because I had been trying so hard to keep it true. He slept again, before I could ask more. On the way back to the villa, I stared out at the city and tried to remember the last week of my life, before Dante Salvatore's name crossed my brother's bloody mouth. My studio. My mother correcting my grocery list with one raised eyebrow because her words often came late now, but never her opinions. Train noise under the apartment windows. Cheap coffee. A life small enough to fit in my own hands. By the time we reached Brooklyn, I understood that small lives were the easiest to break. Maria was waiting in the kitchen with soup and a silence that did not demand speech. I loved her for it within the hour. Luca found me there after dark. There's more on the hard drive. He set a folder on the table. Inside were transfers of my father's old mini cassettes, some labeled in his handwriting, most not. One file had been opened recently. The timestamp was 2 nights ago. Paolo, play it, I said. We listened in Dante's study because apparently every terrible revelation in that house belonged there. The file began with my father's voice again, older this time, tired in a way I had never fully heard as a child. If something happens to me, he said, Sophia gets the apartment, Paolo gets the keys from the green jar. And if Lorenzo Vitelli ever sits across from Dante Salvatore and says family made him what he is, you tell Dante that's a lie. I stopped breathing. Then another voice came in Lorenzo's. Clearer this time, not drunk but calm, almost fond. Lucia cried for her brother before we took her. That was the useful part. He had to learn. A chair scraped. My father said, You're sick. Lorenzo laughed softly. No, I'm practical. The recording cut with a sharp slap, then static. Dante had not moved during any of it. He stood by the window, one hand behind his back, his reflection faint in the dark glass. No reaction. That was the worst reaction of all. I turned to him. He did this to your sister? Yes. And you've kept him near you? I was 19 when Lucia died. His voice stayed level. By 22, I was running what he built. Men don't ask too many questions when the answer might rearrange the throne. Luca looked at him. We ask them now. Dante nodded once. I should have left it there. I should have let grief belong to the person with the larger claim. Instead, I heard my father inside the tape and something split in me. He hid this, I said. For years. Neither man answered. My father knew, maybe not everything, enough. My laugh came out raw. He fixed church speakers and made tomato sandwiches and helped the man who destroyed your sister keep breathing. Sophia, Luca began. No. I backed away from the console. No, don't do that careful voice. Don't make him noble and me convenient. Dante finally turned from the window. There's a difference, he said, between hiding the truth to survive and using it to profit. You don't know why he stayed quiet. I know why most men do. The cruelty of that landed hard because he was not speaking about my father alone. I'm not most men, I snapped. His gaze dropped, briefly, to the tape in my hand. No, he said, you're not. That should not have felt like kindness. To get my breathing under control, I did the only thing I knew to do when a voice broke something open. I worked. I took one of the older damaged files from the drive and began cleaning it with too much focus. Maria had told me there was a reel in the house Dante never listened to anymore. A cassette transfer of his mother singing in bad home recording quality. I found the digital copy. Loaded it. Started repairing the warble. Luca watched for a moment, then quietly left. Dante did not. The old song emerged by degrees. A woman's voice, warm and low, singing an Italian lullaby with one laugh in the middle, when a child Lucia may be interrupted off mic. The tape had a tear near the center. If I overcorrected it, the whole phrase would distort. You have to touch the damaged part lightly, I said, eyes on the screen. If you force it, it shreds. Silence at my shoulder. I kept going because stopping would have meant feeling too much. The strongest section isn't always the one that survives, I said. Sometimes it's just the one least handled. When the repaired line played clean through, Dante made a sound so small it could have been the floor settling. When I finally looked up, he was watching me the way men in churches looked at candles they did not believe in, but still did not blow out. He reached toward my face, stopped with his knuckles just shy of my cheek. Almost. Then his phone rang. Luca's name lit the screen. Dante answered. His expression changed after the first sentence. Say it again. Pause. He looked at me. Bianca is dead, he said. Betrayal had just become something larger. Bianca's body was found in a car near Staten Island, cleanly shot and arranged like a lesson. Luca gave us the facts in the villa's small family chapel because nowhere else in the house felt private enough anymore. Candles burned beneath a dark Madonna. Marble held the cold under my shoes. Outside, rain tapped the stained glass windows with patient fingers. Lorenzo tied off the loose end, Luca said. No prints, no witnesses who'll live to testify, but the message is clear. Bruno, standing near the back pew with a protein shake in one hand, muttered, I hate when a murder sends better notes than my birthday. Maria elbowed him in the ribs without looking away from the altar. Dante stood in front of the first pew, head slightly bowed, one hand resting on the carved wood. He had not slept. I could hear it in the scrape at the bottom of his voice, even when he said nothing. When Luca finished, Dante dismissed everyone but me. The chapel door shut. The silence after it was thick with wax, old prayer, and the faint mineral smell of coming rain. I should leave, I said. The word surprised us both. He turned. I had been thinking them all morning, ever since Bianca's body. If this was what happened to women near Dante, then continuing to stand within reach of him was not courage. It was negligence with my own life. My mother needs me, I said. Paolo needs me. And every hour I'm here, Lorenzo gets a bigger reason to use us. Dante's eyes were unreadable. That is the intelligent choice. Why does it sound like an accusation? Because intelligence is not what keeps people in my world. I laughed once, without humor. That's exactly why I don't belong in it. He took one step closer. Not enough to crowd me. Enough to change the air. You belonged in it the moment you turned my phone back on. The line landed so hard I forgot to breathe. He had noticed. Of course he had. Men like Dante noticed everything that touched a scar. That was anger, I said. No. His voice dropped. That was the first honest thing anybody had done to me in a very long time. The chapel seemed smaller suddenly. My pulse climbed. Somewhere in the house a door shut, faint and far away. I looked at the worn marble between us. You barely know me. I know you called 9 times when any sane person would have run. I know you looked at a room full of armed men and touched what nobody touches because being heard mattered more to you than surviving gracefully. His jaw tightened once. I know you repair voices instead of burying them. There it was. The thing. Why her? He exhaled slowly, like admitting it cost him something physical. I have not been able to stop hearing that. My hands trembled. I pressed them together. Stage 2, some reckless part of me whispered. I was no longer afraid of him. I was afraid of what happened to me when he said true things in a quiet voice. Rain thickened against the stained glass. I don't know what this is doing to me, I said. It was the most exposed sentence I had ever spoken. Dante closed his eyes for a moment, as if the sound of it struck somewhere tender he did not trust. Then he opened them and crossed the last step between us. His hand rose to my face. This time he touched me, just the backs of his fingers first, along my cheek, as if checking whether I would move away. I could have. He left me that. I didn't. Almost finally becoming something else, his thumb brushed the corner of my mouth. Warm now, warmer than in the freezer. Warmer than his ring against my skin. You should leave, he said roughly. The contradiction made my eyes burn. Then why are you touching me? Because I'm failing. Before I could answer, a shot cracked outside the chapel doors. Dante spun, shoved me down behind the front pew, and drew his weapon in one fluid movement. Glass shattered in the hallway. Men shouted. I heard Bruno yell something about dying hungry, and then a body hit the outer door hard enough to rattle the hinges. Ambush. Dante fired twice through the opening as Luca's voice barked orders from the corridor. I curled against stone and wood, hands over my head, hating the helplessness of my own body. Then the side chapel door burst inward and a gunman came through. He never reached me. Dante crossed the space between us like a verdict. One shot. Then another when the first man still moved. The efficiency of it was worse than fury. No warning. No speech, just result. Blood spread over the chapel tile. I stared. He knelt in front of me at once. One bloody hand braced on the pew so he would not touch me with it. Look at me. I looked. Are you hit? I shook my head. He scanned me anyway, eyes moving over my shoulders, my throat, my hands. When he found no blood that was mine, his expression broke by a hair. Enough for me to see the terror underneath discipline. Bruno shoved his head in through the main door. Boss, if I get shot before my cheat meal, I'm haunting everybody. Clear the East Hall, Dante snapped. Bruno vanished. The chapel rang with gunfire, then less of it. Then only radios and footsteps. Dante stayed kneeling in front of me while the violence burned itself out around the edges. His gaze dropped to my mouth again. He leaned in, stopped. Almost. Then I said the only true thing I had left. Please don't stop because you think I don't understand. His eyes shut once. When he kissed me, it was slow enough to hurt. No rush. No claim taken by force. Just the careful pressure of his mouth and the tremor he hid everywhere else. I felt restraint in it. Felt how much he was not doing because I mattered to him more than the wanting did. When he drew back, his forehead rested briefly against mine. War, he said, voice unsteady for the first time, is here. And somehow I knew he meant inside him too. War made the villa louder and emptier at the same time. Men filled the halls. Radios hissed. Cars came and went through the gates without warning. Yet every room I entered felt as if something essential had stepped out of it just before I arrived. Dante moved through those days like a man cutting himself thinner on purpose. Meetings, retaliations, calls at all hours. He kissed my forehead once in a corridor and said nothing. That hurt more than distance should have. I spent mornings with my mother in the safe apartment downtown, afternoons at Paolo's hospital room, nights at the villa cleaning audio until the old files started sounding more alive to me than the people passing my door. That was when Luca took the bullet. Not for Dante, for Paolo. The hospital had moved my brother to a private floor under a false name. By then, I understood false names were just expensive prayers. I was halfway down the corridor with a bag of clean clothes and 2 contraband peach yogurts when the first orderly dropped. He did not stumble. He folded. Then Luca was suddenly in front of me, one hand at my shoulder, the other drawing his gun from beneath his coat as if he had been born doing it. Down. The hallway exploded. Glass burst out of a nurse's station. Someone shouted in Italian. Somebody else screamed in English. I hit the linoleum so hard my teeth clicked together. The smell of antiseptic mixed instantly with cordite and the hot copper stink of blood. Paolo tried to get out of bed. "Don't," I shouted, crawling toward the room. Luca fired once, twice. A man in scrubs went down against the far wall, weapon skidding from his hand. Another came through the stairwell door and Luca turned to meet him. The second shot that answered caught Luca high in the side. He jerked, stayed standing, and shot back anyway. That image never left me. Luca Ferrante with blood darkening his gray suit, still moving toward danger because my brother was behind him, and Dante had set a name into the air, and men like Luca treated it like architecture. By the time Bruno and 2 more guards stormed the floor, it was over. Bruno kicked one dropped gun away and looked at the blood spreading under Luca with betrayed exhaustion. I skip one pastry and everybody loses their minds. Even then, even there, the line hit the wrong part of my chest and steadied me. Luca let the medics lower him onto a gurney with visible contempt. When his eyes found mine, they were flatter with pain than I had ever seen them. "You see," he said through his teeth, "optimism was stupid." I laughed once and then cried because the alternative was falling apart on the floor beside him. Dante arrived 3 minutes later. I heard him before I saw him. Not footsteps. Silence. The particular silence of armed men making room. He crossed the wrecked corridor with rain still on his coat from outside and stopped over Luca first, taking the damage in with one glance. Then his eyes found Paolo in the bed, then me. No one else existed. "Any injuries?" he asked. I shook my head. He looked anyway. Over my face, my throat, my hands. He always looked as if damage could hide in the air, and he might still catch it if he moved fast enough. "Take them," he said to Bruno. I knew before I understood. Take us where? Away? No. His gaze snapped to mine. 9. Cold. Warning, not warm. I stood up too quickly and swayed. "You don't get to decide this because something happened." "Something keeps happening." That shut me up. Paolo, pale and sweating, said from the bed, "Soph, just go." I turned on him. "And leave you? I'm the reason they found us." The room went quiet enough for heart monitors to become thunder. I looked at my brother. Really looked. At the guilt, dragging his mouth down. At the fear he had been hiding under jokes since the alley. "What does that mean?" His eyes slid to Dante, then away. "I borrowed money months ago. For Ma's rehab. A man said he worked for the docks. Then he wanted names, shifts, numbers. I never knew they'd..." My skin went cold from the inside out. Dante did not move. That was worse than anger. "You gave Lorenzo access," he said. Paolo swallowed. I gave a man with a fake name too much. I could not feel my fingers. There it was, the betrayal with my brother's face on it. Not clean villainy. Not excuse, either. Just weakness, love, panic, and a cost too large to hold. Dante handed Bruno a set of keys and an envelope thick with cash and documents. "Take Sofia, her mother, and Paolo to the airfield. Plane leaves in 40 minutes. I stared at him. "You said I was part of this now." I said too much. "What about Lorenzo?" His jaw flexed once. "He came from my people in a hospital. There are answers to that. The answer frightened me because I knew what kind he meant. Bruno, suddenly gentle beneath all the suit and muscle, touched my elbow. Come on. I went because my mother was already being brought up from the lower floor, because Paolo could barely sit up, because leaving felt less like cowardice than triage. We reached the villa only long enough to collect 2 bags of Maria's rosary, which she pressed into my hand hard enough to hurt. At the gate, the cars were running. Open. No one stopped me. No one lied. The choice was real. My mother slept against the window in the back seat, exhausted by fear and sedatives. Paolo winced beside her every time the car hit a pothole. Bruno drove. Ahead, beyond the windshield, the road widened toward every life I had imagined before this one. My phone buzzed in my lap. Not a call, a file transfer. From Luca, 1 recovered clip, sent before the ambulance doors closed. I opened it with shaking hands. Static. My father breathing. Lorenzo's voice underneath, clearer than before. If the girl ever hears the whole tape, he said, bring her to Lucia's church. Dante will follow. He always follows ghosts. My pulse stopped, then came back wrong. He wanted me gone because he thought distance would save me. He was wrong. Turn around, I said. Bruno checked the mirror. You have got to be kidding me. Turn around. Paolo saw my face and understood before Bruno did. Soft. If I leave now, he walks into that alone. That's the point, Bruno said. Also, selfishly, I was 5 minutes from an airfield protein bar. I clutched Luca's phone so hard the edges bit my palm. Through the windshield, the gate lights behind us were shrinking. I had wanted an exit. What I had really wanted was permission not to choose. Turn around, I said again. I'm going back. This time my voice didn't shake. Bruno muttered something heartfelt and obscene about loving difficult women, took the next hard turn, and drove us back toward the fire. I chose the darkness with my eyes open. Lucia's church stood 3 blocks from the river, half hidden behind scaffolding and a row of sycamores shedding bark in ghost-colored strips. By the time we got there, dusk had turned the stained glass black from the outside. Bruno wanted men. Dante wanted perimeter. I wanted speed. In the end, the city chose for us. A van hit us broadside before we reached the curb. Metal screamed. My head slammed against the window. Bruno cursed with operatic depth as the car skidded half onto the sidewalk. The back door jerked open. Hands found me. Paolo shouted my name once. Then a cloth went over my mouth that smelled sweet and chemical and wrong. When I woke, my wrists were zip-tied to a chair, not a dungeon. That would have been easier to understand. This was a rehearsal room above the old church sanctuary peeling plaster. Stacked hymnals, a standing fan that clicked every 6th rotation, and dust warmed by old wiring. Somebody had left a child's violin in the corner with 1 string snapped. Lorenzo Vitelli sat across from me in a brown overcoat with a silver rosary, looped through his fingers as if religion had become one more object he could use without believing in it. He was handsome in the stale way certain old wolves were handsome. Enough charm left in the face to make the bones of cruelty harder to trust. You look like your father when you're angry, he said. I tested the ties. Useless. You murdered your own niece. He tilted his head. No, I educated my nephew. I had never hated a sentence more. He leaned back. Do you know what Dante was before Lucia died? Tender in the wrong places. A boy who still believed blood made promises. Men would have eaten him alive. So you did it first. Something bright crossed his eyes. Approval, maybe, or the sick pleasure of being seen clearly. He survived. The fan clicked. 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 I let him talk because men like Lorenzo mistook audience for surrender. Because my heart was pounding hard enough to crack ribs, and I needed something to do with terror, besides drown in it. You think Dante is your masterpiece, I said. He is my correction. There it was, the mirror. Not just an enemy. The blueprint of what Dante feared still lived in him. Lorenzo rose and came nearer. I smelled cold tobacco and old wool. Your father understood necessity eventually. No, I said. He hid from it. a smile, and died for the effort. The rune tilted. My father, not an accident, not a heart that gave out too young after too many double shifts, something colder. Lorenzo watched the truth land and seemed almost kind for one hideous second. He would not erase the copy, so a truck lost its brakes. I stared at him until my vision blurred red at the edges. Then the door opened behind him and Paolo was pushed inside. My brother's lip was split. His hands were bound in front of him. Shame moved over his face when he saw mine. Soft. That one word carried enough apology to drown a house. Lorenzo sighed. Family. Such an efficient weapon. Paolo looked at me, not at him. I'm sorry. He said if I brought you back, he'd let me live. The hurt of it went through me cleanly. No dramatics, no collapse. Just the new shape of my own brother's fear fitting around the wound he had made. I wanted to say something cruel. Instead, I heard my mother struggling for words after the stroke, saw Paolo massaging her hand because patience came easier to him than to me, remembered him giving up nursing school because somebody had to work. Love did not make people good. It made them reachable. Lorenzo's phone buzzed against a wooden music stand near the window. The sound hit me like a live wire. Muted vibration. Wood. The exact trapped warning that had started all of this. He smiled when he saw me hear it. You know what I love about missed calls, Sophia? They prove timing rules everything. He crossed to answer it. And because every room had sound in it if you listened correctly, I listened. Fan click every sixth turn. Distant fairy horn through old glass. Organ pipes in the sanctuary below resonating faintly with traffic. One man outside the door shifting his weight heavier on the left foot. Another coughing with a smoker's catch. The snapped violin string in the corner gleamed silver. I dragged my chair 2 inches. Then 2 more while Lorenzo spoke in a low voice by the window. Paolo saw what I was doing. Whatever else he had done, he still knew me. He knocked over a stack of hymnals with his shoulder. The crash made the guard outside open the door, made Lorenzo turn. In that tiny gap, I hooked the zip tie against the broken violin string. It sliced skin. I kept pulling. Plastic bit. Stretched. Gave. Enough, Lorenzo snapped at Paolo. My right hand came free. I grabbed the child's violin bow, rose with the chair still half attached to me, and drove the sharpened wood into Lorenzo's phone first. Not his throat. Not his eye. His phone. The screen shattered in my hand. The call died. He stared at it, then at me, and for the first time all evening something like surprise crossed his face. Good. The guard lunged in. Paolo threw himself sideways into the man's knees. They hit the floor together in a chaos of limbs and curses. I ripped the remaining tie loose and ran for the stairwell, blood slick on my wrist, Lorenzo shouting behind me. Halfway down the stairs, the church bells began to ring. Not bells. Gunshots outside, echoing through stone. Dante had come. And if he was here, then one of them was about to become something they could never take back. I made it to the choir loft before a hand caught my hair. I twisted, struck backward with the broken bow, and heard a man grunt. Not enough. He slammed me against the railing hard enough to burst stars behind my eyes. Below us, the church sanctuary yawned wide and dark, rows of pews, candles overturned, marble saints watching with their blank carved pity. The big front doors were open. Men moved in the nave like shadows with guns. On your knees, the guard snarled. I bit his wrist. He yelled. His grip loosened. I drove my elbow back, slipped free, and ran along the loft as wood splintered under stray gunfire from below. Someone shouted my name. Dante. Not loud. That was the terrifying part. He said it the way he shot. Nothing wasted. 9. I reached the iron ladder that led up into the bell tower and climbed with shaking legs. The guard came after me. The tower narrowed into dust and rope and old brick. Every bell strike shuddered through the soles of my feet. At the top, wind punched through the louvered openings. The city spread out below in broken lights and wet roofs and the black slip of river. I turned just as the guard reached the landing. He smiled when he saw there was nowhere left to go. Then Bruno appeared behind him, panting like an offended saint, and hit him with a fire extinguisher. The man went down without dignity. Bruno leaned over, hands on his knees. If I die in a bell tower before marrying Maria, I'm filing an appeal with heaven. I made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. Bruno straightened and looked me over, his face changing when he found the blood at my wrist. Can you move? Yes. Great. Because the boss is downstairs turning architecture into trauma. He got me halfway down the ladder before Dante met us on the landing. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then his hands were on my face, my shoulders, my arms, checking, counting, assuring himself of boundaries. He smelled like rain, smoke, and the colder edge beneath his cologne that always came after violence. His knuckles were split. Blood darkened the cuff of his shirt. Where? He asked. Not mine. I touched his wrist instead. You're bleeding. Not enough. His forehead pressed to mine so briefly it might have been a collapse. Or prayer. Almost words passed between us and burned up there. Below, men shouted that Lorenzo was heading for the crypt access. Dante drew back first. Of course he did. Restraint had become the shape of every mercy he gave me. Bruno, he said. I know. Save the girl. Ruin my cardio. Dante started down. I caught his hand. He looked back. Don't go after him like he's the only ghost in the room, I said. Something changed in his face. Small. Ruinous. This is where his point of view would have started if he allowed himself one. Dante. He had wanted her from the first moment she defied a room built to make people smaller. Not beauty. Not innocence. The terrible, impossible way she gave him back his phone and with it every call he had ever failed to answer. Now her blood was on his cuff, and her brother's guilt was in the walls, and Lorenzo was below, waiting like the last lesson of a ruined childhood. He wanted to kill his uncle. He wanted to stay. Only one of those choices looked like the man he had promised himself never to become, and he could not tell which anymore. He went. I followed as far as the sanctuary before Bruno caught the back of my coat. No. Let go. 9. With all due respect and some fear, absolutely not. His use of the nickname startled me into stillness. Warmth had crept into it when I wasn't looking. Luca stood near the altar, pale from blood loss but upright, one arm bound tight under his jacket. When he saw me, his mouth thinned with relief. You're supposed to be airborne. I've been informed I'm terrible at following plans. That, he said, glancing toward the crypt stairs where Dante had vanished, appears contagious. The church shook once with a deep concussion from below. Dust fell from the rafters. Then silence. Then a single shot. I stopped feeling my hands. When Dante came back up, Lorenzo was not with him, but neither was the old blankness in his face. He looked older by years and younger by grief. Something had been cut out and left bleeding. It's done, he said. Nobody asked how. Outside, dawn had begun its gray work over the river. Ambulances finally approached now that the shooting had stopped. Bruno sat heavily on the front steps and accepted, with tears in his eyes, a ham and cheese roll from Maria, who had arrived wrapped in a coat over her nightdress and somehow taken charge of 3 paramedics and half a crime scene. My angel, Bruno whispered to the sandwich. Eat before I change my mind, Maria said. I stood under the sycamores while Dante spoke with Luca and the remaining captains. Wind lifted the edge of his coat. Church bells, real ones this time, began to ring the hour. He came to me only when everything else had been handled. That hurt and healed me at once. You should hate me, he said. I looked at him, at the fatigue carving him hollow, at the blood on his cuffs, at the care with which he held himself away from touching me, as if he still believed he could keep the dark on his own side by sheer discipline. I saw what he made, I said. I also saw what you fought not to become. His eyes closed once. When they opened, there was nothing guarded left in them, only exhaustion and that terrible attention he saved for truths. I don't know if I can give you a life that feels clean. I'm not asking for clean. That was when both of us understood the cost. The next war would not be about surviving Lorenzo. It would be about surviving what loving each other asked of us. By the time the sun fully rose, we both knew one of us might still not make it through the kind of future that remained. The bells kept ringing. It turned out Lorenzo had not gone to Lucia's church expecting only a reunion. He had gone to buy the family. The proof was in the envelope Luca found in the crypt office after the blood had dried. Account ledgers, port percentages, signatures from 2 minor captains, and a second recording device Lorenzo had carried as insurance. On it was his own voice outlining how Dante had been tempered into leadership by necessary losses. Not confession exactly. Worse. Pride. Luca wanted a quiet cleanup. Dante wanted every captain in one room. So did I. You can't seriously be considering this, Luca said when I laid the plan out on the study table. The walnut was scarred now. Somebody had set a coffee cup down too hard over old polish. Dante's phone buzzed once against the wood, this time on sound, and he silenced the call only after checking it. The noise ran through me like memory and landed somewhere different now. I met Luca's stare. Lorenzo built himself on what people didn't hear clearly enough. Fine. Then let them hear him. The house speaker system fed into the same central board as the security archive. Maria knew where the hidden service corridors ran. Bruno knew which captains cheated at cards, and which would come armed even to a christening. And I knew how to clean a damaged voice until denial sounded childish. Dante stood at the end of the table listening. The room around him, Luca's impatience, Bruno's complaint from the doorway that strategy sessions needed snacks, rain ticking at the windows, seemed to wait for his shape before deciding what it was. This makes her visible, Luca said. I'm already visible, I answered. Dante looked at me then, long enough to be almost touch. Do it, he said. The meeting was called for midnight in the room beneath the river restaurant Dante's father used to own. A private cellar reached through a freight elevator and protected by enough steel to survive a siege. Men came in dark coats smelling of tobacco, damp wool, sea wind, and money. Nobody laughed. Nobody sat until Dante did. I stood in the control alcove behind smoked glass with Luca at my left and Bruno at my right chewing mint gum like violence required fresh breath. If this goes badly, Bruno whispered, I wanted on record that I died deeply in love and underfed. You ate 6 arancini before we got here, Luca said. Stress calories don't count. Below us, Dante began. He did not speechify. Of course he didn't. He placed Lorenzo's ledger on the table. He named the dead. He named the hospital attack. Then he nodded once toward the glass. I hit play. My father's voice filled the cellar first. Grainy, mortal. Then Lorenzo's, clearer with each second. Lucia crying. The useful part. The boy needed hardening. Family made him what he is. The effect was visible even from behind the glass. One captain crossed himself. Another went still in the dangerous way older men go still, before choosing which side of history they can live with. A third stood up so fast his chair hit the floor. Then the lights cut out. Not all of them. Only enough to blind and divide. Gunfire tore through the dark. The first bullet hit the glass near my shoulder and starred it white. Down. Luca shoved me behind the console as alarms began to howl through the cellar. Not fire alarms. The old flood sirens wired to the river sensors decades ago. Low, mechanical, animal. I tasted metal and panic. Men shouted below. Somebody screamed that Lorenzo's remaining crew were in the service tunnels. Bruno drew 2 guns with the exhausted competence of a man opening an umbrella in bad weather. Dante's voice came once through the chaos. Sophia, I'm here. I shouted back. Then one of the tunnel doors burst inward, and a gunman came into the control alcove. I did not think. I grabbed the emergency audio monitor, a square of solid black metal, and swung it with both hands at his temple. He dropped hard enough to rattle the rack. Bruno stared at me. Marry me if Maria says no. Luca, bleeding fresh through his bandage now, shot past my shoulder at a second man in the doorway. The recoil threw him back a step. He stayed up. Again. That kind of loyalty should have felt noble. Instead, it made me angry enough to survive. The speaker system was still live, so I opened every channel. Lorenzo's confession flooded the cellar, the kitchen above, the freight shaft, the stairwell, the street-level dining room where the last staff had already fled. His voice boomed through brick and steel, while men killed and decided and understood. You cannot build a kingdom on a lie and expect sound not to travel. When Dante emerged into the alcove, he was breathing hard, blood at his mouth, eyes lit with a cold I had never seen turned so fully outward. He looked at the dead gunman by my feet, then at the metal monitor still in my hands. "You hit him," he said. I nodded. Something almost like fierce, broken pride crossed his face. "Stay behind me." This time I didn't. We went down into the tunnel together because the flood siren had forced Lorenzo toward the river exit, and I knew the old wiring map better than the men chasing him. Steam hissed from a cracked pipe. Concrete sweated. Water lapped black at the lower step. Lorenzo waited there with one remaining guard and a gun pointed at Dante's chest. "See?" he said almost gently. "You only became worthy after me." Dante did not answer. He just moved. The shot that followed took Lorenzo's guard in the throat. Mine hit the overhead valve wheel because it was the only clear target I had. Scalding steam blasted sideways. Lorenzo flinched. Dante crossed the space and put a bullet through his uncle's heart at arm's length. No speech, no absolution, just an ending that cost him exactly what it should. When Lorenzo dropped into the river dark water at the tunnel edge, Dante looked like a man who had won nothing clean. Later, upstairs, while the sirens died and the captains chose survival over revolt, Luca sank into a chair white-faced, but alive. 3 men from Lorenzo's side lay under sheets. 2 from Dante's. Dante found me near the freight elevator and touched his forehead to mine. It was over. War ended messily. There was no trumpet note, no sunrise that made everything noble, just cleanup. Statements to men who would never repeat them in court. Funerals with too many black coats. Maria crying in the pantry where no one was meant to see, and then coming out composed enough to feed 30 mourners. Luca healing badly but stubbornly. Paolo learning how to live with guilt that had not killed him, but had changed the shape of his back forever. And Dante, who moved through the aftermath with a quieter kind of brutality, less blood, more choice. He shut down 2 routes Lorenzo had profited from because children had disappeared through them. He paid off debts my father had died carrying without ever mentioning it to me until I found the receipts in a drawer and cried in his bathroom where the marble floor was cold under my feet, and the shower still smelled faintly of cedar soap and night air. I had not moved into his room exactly. I had simply stopped leaving it. 6 weeks later, on a rain-heavy evening that made the windows shiver, I found Bruno in the kitchen wearing an apron that read "Kiss the Cook" and chopping parsley with the concentration of a bomb technician. "This feels unsafe," I said. "It is romance," he corrected. "More dangerous." Maria stood at the stove pretending not to watch him. She had rolled her sleeves to the elbows. Flour marked one cheek. For a woman who had survived decades in this house, she looked abruptly girlish. "You're cooking for her?" I asked. Bruno lowered his voice. "I am reheating something she made and adding courage." Maria snorted. "He boiled the water wrong." "I have abs," Bruno said. "Precision is wasted on me," I laughed. Real laughter, the easy kind that no longer felt stolen. When Dante entered, he paused in the doorway and looked from Bruno's apron to my face to Maria trying and failing not to smile. The kitchen light turned his shirt softer than black ever deserved. He had left his gun with his coat in the hall. That still startled me when it happened. "Am I interrupting a hostage situation?" he asked. "Courtship," Bruno said gravely. "Pray for me." Dante's gaze came to me. Held. Almost. That look had changed too. Still dangerous. Still able to undo the room around it. But now there was something settled inside it, as if he had finally admitted to himself that wanting peace did not make him weak, only responsible for protecting it. Later, after Bruno burned the parsley, Maria saved dinner, Luca arrived to mock them both, and Paolo managed to eat 2 bowls before admitting Maria's soup might actually be better than mine. The house quieted. Dante found me in the small back conservatory where rain tracked silver down the glass. He stood behind me for a while without touching me. "Luca says the outer accounts are clean," he said. Bruno says if Maria doesn't marry him by Christmas, he'll take vows. I smiled into the dark window. And what do you say? He was quiet long enough that I turned. He held a ring box. Not open. Just there in his hand, heavy with intention. This isn't rescue, he said, and it isn't payment for what you survived with me. Rain tapped the glass harder. Somewhere behind us a floorboard gave under the old house, settling into weather. I know, I whispered. He came closer then, the distance folding with painful care. I can give you apartments, guards, papers, every practical shield money buys. I cannot give you a life untouched by what I am. I know. His throat worked once. It mattered that I did not rush him. It mattered that he had to say the dangerous part himself. What I can offer, he said, voice low, is that I will hear you. Every time. Even when it hurts. Especially then. My eyes burned instantly. He opened the box. The ring was old, not ostentatious. A family diamond set low in worn gold. The kind of piece a woman could live in instead of merely display. Lucia marked it for resizing before she died, he said. My mother kept it. I never let anyone touch it. The trust inside that almost knocked me backward. I put my hand over my mouth, then lowered it, because hiding felt dishonest. Dante. He looked at me with all the patience he had once reserved for violence, and now gave somehow to this. You don't have to answer fast, 9. 9. Warm now. Entirely. The number no longer meant what he had missed. It meant what I had insisted on being, heard. Yes, I said. The word came out broken with happiness and grief, and all the impossible rooms between them. His exhale shook. When he slid the ring onto my finger, his hands were steadier than mine. He kissed my forehead first, then my mouth. Slow, familiar, earned, not a fairy tale. Something better. A promise made by two people who knew exactly what promises cost. Inside the kitchen, Bruno shouted, Maria, if that was a yes and nobody tells me, I swear before God I'll eat bread. Dante's mouth touched mine again, softer this time. Come on, he murmured. Let them witness it, and because ordinary happiness still felt like the strangest rebellion in the world, I went with him. The kitchen light was still on. 9 months later, the baby in the apartment upstairs had learned how to cry like an opera soprano. That was how I knew it was 6:30. Not the clock. Not the pale wash of winter light over the East River. The baby, then the pipes, then the first delivery truck rattling over the street below. Ordinary noise. My favorite kind. I was in the kitchen barefoot, hair half pinned up, restoring a parish recording for Lucia's memorial fund on my laptop while tomato sauce thickened on the stove. We had converted the ground floor office of one of Dante's legal businesses into an audio archive and scholarship program in Lucia's name. Girls who had lost family to violence could study music, engineering, restoration, anything that taught them how to make damaged things speak again. Sometimes when I unlocked the studio in the morning, I thought about my father and had to stand very still before touching anything. The apartment smelled like basil, coffee, and the colder trace of Dante's cologne drifting in from the hall. He came in carrying 2 garment bags and 1 box of pastries Maria had sent for the children, by which she meant me, Paolo, Bruno, Luca, and any lost soul who entered hungry. Bruno is downstairs pretending he doesn't know which flowers Maria likes, Dante said. I smiled without looking up. Has he tried asking her? He says mystery is masculine. That explains why she hasn't agreed yet. Dante set the pastries down. His phone vibrated against the kitchen island, muted. The sound stopped me, mid-click. A soft trapped buzz against wood. I looked up. He had been answering calls on the first ring for months, sometimes to a degree that bordered on holy madness, but this morning in the rush of suits and memorial logistics he had missed the switch with his thumb. He saw me hear it. For a second neither of us spoke. The whole story of us moved quietly through that pause. I crossed the kitchen, took the phone, clicked the sound back on, and placed it in his hand. Same gesture. Different life. His fingers closed around the phone and around mine at the same time. Not to stop me. To keep me there. He looked at me the way he had in the study that first night, only now there was no cold observation left in it. Only memory. Gratitude. Love with its sleeves rolled up. There it is, he said softly. What? The thing you do. I tried to smile it off because some exposures still felt dangerous even after 9 months of waking beside him. Saving you from your own settings? His mouth curved. No. 9. Refusing to let silence decide for me. The line went through me so cleanly I had to look down at our hands. That was the unresolved part, maybe. Not whether he loved me. He did. Not whether I loved him. God help me, I did. It was whether a person could ever be fully done grieving the version of themselves who existed before blood entered the room. Whether love healed that or simply gave it somewhere softer to live. The phone rang again, this time loud. He answered at once. Salvatore,